Star Wars is a galaxy filled with epic battles, complex characters, and a rich lore that has captivated audiences for decades. But even the most beloved saga has its share of puzzling moments that leave fans scratching their heads. What happened to all those clone troopers after the Clone Wars? Why didn't the Death Star just destroy the planets it targeted? These questions swirl around in discussions, and while some may call them plot holes, others see them as intriguing mysteries waiting to be revealed. So, let's kick things off with a mystery from The Force Awakens, one that puzzled fans instantly. Remember that moment when Rey stumbles upon Luke's old blue lightsaber in Maz Kanata's basement? Yeah, the same one that Luke lost in The Empire Strikes Back, tumbling down a seemingly endless shaft in Cloud City. How on earth did it get from there to Maz's little castle? Well, the truth is, we don't really know yet. But before you call it a plot hole, let's dive a little deeper. While the movies haven't fully explained it yet, the Star Wars universe has hinted at some possibilities. The novelizations and even some of the comics suggest that scavengers could have retrieved it. After all, Cloud City is a busy place, and scavengers are everywhere in Star Wars, right? It's not too far-fetched to imagine someone found that iconic weapon, and it changed hands a few times before Maz got her hands on it. Plus, we know there's always more to be revealed in the Star Wars saga, so maybe one day we'll get the full story. Until then, it's not really a plot hole, more of an intentional mystery. Next up, we have a classic head-scratcher from Return of the Jedi. In one scene, Leia tells Luke that she remembers her real mother. Now, if you've watched Revenge of the Sith, you know this doesn't quite add up, because Padmé dies right after giving birth to Leia and Luke. So, how could Leia remember her? This has been debated by fans for years. Some say it's just a continuity error. Maybe George Lucas hadn't fully figured out the backstory for Padmé yet when he wrote Return of the Jedi. But there's actually a way to make sense of it. Some fans believe that Leia's memories of Padmé aren't real memories, but rather Force memories. It's not unheard of in the Star Wars universe for someone to connect with others through the Force. Leia might be recalling emotions or images that were passed to her through the Force, rather than actual memories. It's an interesting take, and it fits with how we know the Force works, sometimes mysterious, often emotional, and always connecting people in ways that go beyond the physical. So, while it seems like a plot hole, the Force might have a hand in this one. Alright, here's one that people love to bring up. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi meets R2-D2, and he famously says, "I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid." But if you've watched the prequels, you know Obi-Wan spent a lot of time with R2-D2 during the Clone Wars. So why doesn't he recognize him? Here's where things get interesting. First of all, Obi-Wan never really owned R2-D2, Anakin did, so technically he's not lying. But let's also consider Obi-Wan's personality. By the time we see him in A New Hope, he's been living in exile for years. He's become more of a cryptic, old, wise man, and he's probably choosing his words carefully to avoid revealing too much to Luke too soon. Obi-Wan's whole thing in A New Hope is being vague about the past, like when he tells Luke that his father was killed by Darth Vader. So, while it might seem like Obi-Wan's forgotten all about his time with R2, it's more likely that he's just being his usual mysterious self. Not a plot hole, just Obi-Wan being, well, Obi-Wan. Let's fast forward to The Last Jedi for a minute. One of the major plot points of the movie is that the First Order can track the Resistance fleet through hyperspace. This threw a lot of fans off because hyperspace tracking wasn't a thing in previous Star Wars films. So, is this a plot hole, or is there more to it? Well, it turns out that hyperspace tracking was actually hinted at in Rogue One. Remember the scene where Jyn Erso is going through the Imperial archives and sees the plans for a hyperspace tracking project? That's right. The Empire was working on this technology long before The Last Jedi. The First Order simply perfected it. So, while it might have seemed like a brand new concept thrown in out of nowhere, there's actually a foundation for hyperspace tracking in the Star Wars canon. It's a great example of how Star Wars uses little details across multiple movies to build a bigger picture. The Force Ghosts, one of the coolest but most mysterious aspects of the Star Wars universe. But here's where things get a little confusing. In Revenge of the Sith, we learn that Qui-Gon Jinn discovered how to become a Force ghost, but he never actually appears as one. Meanwhile, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and later even Anakin show up as Force ghosts in the original trilogy. So, what gives? The answer lies in some deeper Star Wars lore, particularly in the Clone Wars animated series. It turns out that Qui-Gon only learnt part of the technique to becoming a Force ghost, which is why he couldn't fully manifest as a spirit like Obi-Wan or Yoda. Yoda and Obi-Wan, on the other hand, completed the training and mastered the ability to become one with the Force after death. Here's one for the fans who have watched the prequels. If the Empire had an army of clone troopers, why don't we see them in the original trilogy? By the time we get to A New Hope, the Empire's soldiers are all regular people, not clones. Did the Empire just forget about the clones? After the Clone Wars, the Empire began phasing out clones. Maintaining a clone army was costly, and the Empire preferred soldiers loyal out of fear and indoctrination, not just programming. That's where stormtroopers came in. The Empire found it cheaper and more effective to recruit regular people through propaganda and force, making it easier to control populations. This is part of what makes the Empire so menacing. They weren't just using mindless soldiers, but turning the galaxy's own citizens against each other. It's a darker, more sinister means of control, aligning perfectly with the Empire's oppressive methods. Finally, let's talk about one of the most controversial moments in Star Wars history: Palpatine's sudden return in The Rise of Skywalker. Fans wondered how the Emperor survived his fall in Return of the Jedi. Was it a plot hole, or was there an explanation? Though the film didn't detail it, Star Wars lore offers answers. Sith immortality, explored in the expanded universe, ties Palpatine's return to cloning and dark rituals, which let Sith Lords transfer their essence into clones or other bodies. The Rise of Skywalker hints that Palpatine used these dark arts to cheat death. So while his return seemed sudden, it's deeply rooted in Star Wars lore, where Sith have long obsessed over defying death. And there you have it. 7 Star Wars plot holes that you thought were mistakes, but actually have some solid explanations behind them. From the mysterious lightsaber in The Force Awakens to Palpatine's dark return, Star Wars is full of moments that may seem confusing at first, but once you dig a little deeper, they all start to make sense. What do you think? Did any of these explanations surprise you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite sci-fi universes. May the Force be with you, and until next time, keep exploring the galaxy.